Hey guys, Anish PyMasters Scholars here. So today we have another problem involving stacks, where we have to write a function that takes in a stack, and then for that stack we duplicate every element. So we basically double the quantity of every element that's in the stack. And we modify the stack. We don't create a new stack and return a new stack. We just modify that existing stack in place. So for example, let's say we have this stack right here that has elements 1, 2, 3, where 3 is at the top of the stack, 1's at the bottom of the stack. As you read left to right, you should read from bottom to top. Once we call our method with this stack as an argument, the stack should now become 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. So every single element in that stack should have been duplicated. Then second example, this stack argument right here with 0, -1. So once we call our function, the stack should become 0, 0, -1, -1. So each of those elements should have been duplicated, or the quantity of each element should be doubled. So what is the best way to solve the problem? So the issue here is if all we do is pop off every element of the stack and then add 2 copies of that element into the stack, the issue there is that we're actually going to get a reversed version of the stack. So it will duplicate every element, but it won't maintain that relative order. So for example, let's say we had the stack 1, 2, 3, where as we read left to right, we read bottom to top, so 3's at the top, 1's at the bottom of the stack. So the issue here is if we were to pop off the stack one by one and then add 2 new copies to the stack, we would so we would pop 3 off first, and then we would add 3 twice. So right now the stack would have 3, 3. So we'd pop off 3 and then add 2 copies of 3, so it would contain stack would contain 3, 3. And then at that point, we wouldn't have anywhere else to go. We wouldn't so if we were modifying the stack in place without creating a new stack, at this point, we would just be popping off and re-adding the same element over and over again. We'd be popping off, re-adding 3 over and over again. But if we were to add these elements into a new stack the same way, just by popping each element off and then adding 2 copies of it into that new stack, it still wouldn't work because the elements of the new stack would be in reverse order relative to the previous stack. So again, for example, let's say we had 1, 2, 3. 3 is at the top of the stack, so we pop off 3 first. And then we add 2 new copies to a new stack. So we add 3, 3 to a new stack. And we repeat that same thing until our original stack is empty. So we would add 2 copies of 2. So we'd pop 2 off the stack, add 2 copies to our new stack. So now our new stack contains 3, 3, 2, 2. Same thing with 1. So we pop off the 1, add 2 copies of 1 to the new stack. So now we did double the quantity of every element, but the elements are now in reverse order relative to the original stack. The original stack is in 1, 2, 3 order. This is in 3, 2, 1 order. So the best way to solve this problem is we do have to create a new stack, but what we have to do first is we have to pop off all the elements in the original stack, add that to the new stack, and then the new stack should contain the elements in reversed order, and then that's when we can start duplicating all the elements and then add that back into our original stack. So what I mean by that is, let's say we have 1, 2, 3 again. So we should we should take all these elements and then one by one, and then add them into a new stack. So our new stack would then contain 3, 2, 1, because it's going to contain the elements in reverse order when we pop up the elements from the previous stack and add them in the new stack one by one. And then now we want to take these elements and add that back into the original stack. So the original stack should be empty now. We've popped off all their elements. We want to process values from the new stack and then add that back to the original stack. So we're going to process 1 first, and then we're going to add 2 copies of 1 to our original stack. So we take 1 out, add 2 copies to our original stack. And then we take the 2 out, and we add 2 copies into our original stack. We take 3 out, add 2 copies of 3 into our original stack. And then now the original stack is modified and it contains the same relative order of elements as before. Now just each element is duplicated. So that is the method that we want to go with here. So how do we do this in code? So basically how it's going to work is we're going to read a stack from user input. The user is going to input multiple different numbers separated by a space as a delimiter. And so we have to read based on that space, create our stack based on that. So those are the elements as part of the stack. And then we're going to have to call a function on that argument or on that stack argument. So we have to create a function called define, and then we'll call it double stack. And it's going to take in a stack, obviously. So like I said, we do have to create a new stack, so we can create it as temporary stack and set that initially to an empty array. We're going to take all the elements from our previous stack and pop them all off and add them one by one to our new stack. So while the original stack's length is greater than 0, meaning that there are still more elements to process, we're going to add every single element from top to bottom into our new stack. So temp.append stack.pop. So we're going to pop every element off our original stack, add that to our new stack until there are no more elements to process in that original stack. So now our new stack should contain the original stack in reversed order. So now what we can do is now we just have to do the same thing. We just have to empty out now our new stack, and when we empty out our new stack and we pop elements off and add them back to the original stack, that should just give back the same order because we're reversing the elements when adding them into temp. Now when adding them into temp, when adding them from temp back into the original stack, we're reversing them once again, meaning we're giving them, we're restoring them to their previous order. So while the length of the original or the new stack is greater than 0 now. Now what we're going to do is we're going to we're going to pop off the new stack. We're going to pop off the new stack element, and we want to add 2 copies of that element back into the original stack because we want to double the quantity of every element. So in order to add 2 copies, I need to save that value in a variable. That variable I'm just going to call num, and that's equal to, and then the top of the current top of the temp stack. And then I'm going to add 2 copies of that element back into the previous stack, so stack.append, and then do that twice. And then, yeah, just keep doing that until there's no more items to process anymore in our temporary stack, meaning we've already taken all the elements from the temporary stack, added them back into the new stack. And that should be it for this. And then, so now we just have to read from user input. So this is going to be the input format. They're going to enter multiple different integers separated by a space between them. So we want to prompt them to enter a stack first. And then, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to call our argument for our method stack. And that should basically be equal to the stack that the user enters. So input, we're going to take their user input. We're going to give them a prompt saying enter values for your stack. And then whatever they enter will be in this format right here. So it'll be multiple values separated by a space. So that's why we can use the split method to help to use that space delimiter to create a list of each of the elements that they enter. The only issue now is that the list elements, because input by default returns a string of the user input, the list elements are also going to be strings of integers rather than integer types. So we're going to modify stack once again. And in this case, stack is just going to be equal to, and then each of those string elements or the stringified integers converted back to an original integer. So you're going to use the int method for a temporary variable. We'll call a temporary variable num for each num in the original stack with the stringified integers. So for each number in the original stack, we're going to convert each of those numbers to an integer type because they're all integers, and then add that back into our original stack. So now we can call double up, or we can. Yeah, so now we're going to call double stack, the double stack function on stack. That should modify the stack, and then we can just print the stack. So let's see here. We could use this example below 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're supposed to get 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4. We're going to duplicate every element. We can do another example, like 0, -1, and we get 0, 0, -1. If we run it just on one element, we're going to get 1, 1. We're just going to duplicate that one element. So that is how you double the quantity of each element in a stack.